The twin suns of Kepler 442b were turning black. Ambassador Nalthara pressed her pale blue hands against the crystal window of the council chamber and watched as enemy ships blocked out the light. Each vessel was as large as a mountain, dark and covered in spikes like some terrible insect. There were hundreds of them filling the sky. "They will be here soon," whispered Elder Corthane from behind her. His voice shook with fear that all Valari could feel through their shared mind connection. "Our cities will burn before the day ends." Nalthara closed her silver eyes and tried to find calm in her heart. The Valari had lived in peace for 10,000 years. They had never built weapons or trained soldiers. Their crystal cities grew from the ground like living things, powered by the quantum crystals that sang beneath their feet. They had art and music and poetry. They had love and dreams and hope for the future. Now the Zephyrian Empire had come to take it all away. The Zephyrians were not like the Valari. They were tall creatures that looked like giant mantis insects, with 4 arms ending in razor claws and black eyes that showed no mercy. They had conquered dozens of worlds in the past century, always taking what they wanted and leaving nothing but empty planets behind. The Valari had heard the stories from refugees who escaped other attacks. Entire species wiped out in days. Beautiful worlds turned into mining operations. "How long do we have?" Nalthara asked without turning from the window. "Their landing ships are already in our atmosphere," Elder Corthine replied. "Perhaps 3 hours, maybe less. 3 hours to save an entire civilization. 3 hours before 10 billion Valari died, and their world became another resource mine for the Zephyrian war machine." Nalthara walked to the communication console in the center of the chamber. The device was made of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. She placed her hands on its surface and felt the familiar tingle as it connected to her mind. Through the quantum network, she could reach any star system in the galaxy. "What are you doing?" asked Elder Corthane. "Calling for help," she said simply. The Elder's face showed confusion. "From who?" "The Galactic Council has already voted. They will not risk war with the Zephyrians to save us. The other peaceful species are too far away or too weak to help. Who else is there?" Nalthara began typing coordinates into the crystal console. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I will send our distress call to every system in the outer rim. Someone has to answer. Someone has to care that we are dying." She started recording her message. Her voice was steady even though her heart was breaking. "This is Ambassador Nalthara of the Valari Council on Kepler 442b. Our world is under attack by the Zephyrian Empire. We are a peaceful people with no weapons and no army. They will kill us all and take our planet for its quantum crystals. We have perhaps hours before they land their soldiers. If anyone can hear this message, please help us. We have children who want to grow up and see the stars. We have artists who create beauty from light and song. We have lovers who dream of tomorrow. Please don't let us die alone." She sent the message racing across space at faster than light speed, aimed at every star system that might have intelligent life. Most would ignore it. Some might feel sad but do nothing. A few might try to help but arrive too late. But maybe, just maybe, someone would come. Far away in space, Captain Jake Morrison sat in the command chair of the Earth Defense Force ship New Frontier. He was drinking coffee from a metal cup and reading reports about asteroid mining operations when his communications officer looked up with surprise. "Captain, I'm getting a distress signal from the Kepler system," said Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez. She was young with dark hair tied back in a military bun and sharp brown eyes that missed nothing. "It's not one of ours." Jake set down his coffee cup. The New Frontier was on patrol duty in the Outer Rim, checking on human colonies and looking for pirates or slavers. They weren't supposed to be getting alien distress calls. "Put it on speakers," he ordered. The bridge fell silent as Nalthara's voice filled the room. Her words were translated by the ship's computer into English, but the emotion needed no translation. Fear, desperation, and a tiny spark of hope that someone, somewhere, might care enough to help. When the message ended, the bridge stayed quiet for a long moment. Commander Ben Clark, Jake's first officer, was the first to speak. "The Kepler system is 72 hours away at maximum burn," he said. He was an older man with gray hair and scars on his hands from his days as a Marine. "By the time we get there, it'll be over." "Maybe," Jake replied, standing up from his chair. "Amy, do we have any information about this Zephyrian Empire?" Lieutenant Rodriguez's fingers danced over her control panel. "Some, sir. They're insectoids from the Rigel sector. Highly militaristic, They've been expanding their territory for the past 100 years. Intelligence reports say they completely wipe out native populations and strip planets for resources. Jake walked to the main display screen where a star map showed their current position and the location of Kepler 442b. 72 hours. It might as well be 72 years if the aliens were already attacking. But something deep in his gut told him they had to try. "Sir," said his tactical officer, Ensign Tom Hayes, a young man fresh out of the academy. "Even if we could get there in time, we're one ship. If these Zephyrians are as dangerous as the reports say, what could we do against an entire invasion fleet?" Jake thought about that question. The New Frontier was a good ship with a good crew, but she wasn't a battleship. She was built for patrol duty and dealing with pirates, not fighting wars. Against a massive alien invasion force, they would last maybe minutes. But he kept thinking about the voice in the distress call, the woman who talked about children who wanted to grow up and see the stars, about artists and lovers and dreams of tomorrow, about people who didn't want to die alone. Jake had been born on Earth, in a city called Denver where the mountains touched the sky and the air was thin enough to make you strong. He had grown up hearing stories about his ancestors who had fought impossible battles and never gave up, even when outnumbered and outgunned. His great-grandfather had been at a place called Normandy during the Old World Wars. His grandfather had served in the Mars colonies during the rebellion. His father had died defending a civilian transport from pirates in the asteroid belt. All of them had faced impossible odds. All of them had chosen to fight anyway. "Amy," he said, turning to his communications officer, "send a message to Earth Fleet Command. Tell them we have an alien species under attack and we're requesting immediate backup. Full battle fleet if possible." "Yes, sir," she replied, her fingers already working. "Tom, plot a course for Kepler 442b. Maximum burn. I want to be there in 60 hours, not 72. "Sir, that'll stress the engines past safety limits," the young ensign warned. "Then we'll fix them when we get there," Jake said. "Ben, get me a full crew briefing in 10 minutes. I want everyone to know what we're walking into." As the New Frontier changed course and began accelerating toward a distant star system, Jake looked out at the darkness of space. Somewhere out there, people were dying. People who had asked the universe for help and gotten nothing but silence in return. Until now. Jake Morrison didn't know much about aliens or galactic politics or the art of impossible rescues. But he knew one thing for certain. When someone called for help, you answered. No matter how far away they were. No matter how bad the odds looked. That's what humans did. The ship raced through the void toward Kepler 442b, carrying a crew of 200 who had no idea they were about to change the galaxy forever. President Elena Martinez stood in the Situation Room deep beneath the White House, staring at a holographic display of the galaxy. Red dots marked Zephyrian territory, which had grown like a cancer across dozens of star systems. A single blue dot marked Kepler 442b, where 10 billion peaceful aliens were about to die. "How sure are we about this intelligence?" she asked Admiral Carl Peterson, the head of Earth's Space Navy. He was a tall man with steel-gray hair and hands that had seen combat in 3 different wars. "Captain Morrison's report is solid," the Admiral replied. "We've also confirmed it with our deep space monitoring stations. The Zephyrian Empire has launched a full invasion fleet against the Volari homeworld. Our xenobiology department says the Volari are completely pacifist. They have no weapons, no military, nothing to defend themselves with." Elena studied the tactical display. Earth's fleet was scattered across human space, protecting colonies and trade routes. Pulling them together would take time they didn't have. But she had made a decision the moment she heard about the crisis. "How long to get a battle fleet to Kepler?" she asked. 70 hours minimum for our closest ships," Peterson answered. "But, Madam President, this could start a war with the Zephyrians. They have hundreds of ships and we're not sure how advanced their technology is." Elena turned away from the display to face the room full of military officers and advisors. Some looked worried. Others looked eager for a fight. All of them were waiting for her decision. "Gentlemen," she said in a voice that carried the authority of leading humanity's first interstellar nation, 60 years ago my grandfather fought in World War III when the Beijing Collective tried to enslave half of Asia. 40 years ago, my father died defending Mars when corporate armies tried to turn it into their private kingdom. I grew up hearing stories about humans who fought impossible battles because it was the right thing to do." She walked back to the tactical display and pointed at the blue dot representing The Valari world. These people sent a distress call to the stars asking for help. They're about to be wiped out by an empire that kills entire species for profit. Every other civilization in the galaxy has decided it's not their problem. She looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes. Well, it's our problem now. Elena turned to Admiral Peterson. Carl, I want every ship we can spare heading to Kepler 442b. This is Operation Starfall, and I want it launched within 6 hours. The room exploded into activity. Officers grabbed phones and tablets, sending orders across the solar system. Within minutes, ships throughout human space were changing course and preparing for the largest military operation in Earth's history. Dr. Lisa Turner hurried through the corridors of the Xenobiology Research Center in Geneva, carrying a tablet filled with everything humanity knew about the Valari species. She was a small woman with curly red hair and green eyes that showed the intelligence that had made her Earth's leading expert on alien life. She entered the briefing room, where a dozen military officers waited for her report. Colonel Sam Washington sat at the front of the group. He was a big man with dark skin and the kind of presence that made people listen when he spoke. His first orbital drop division would be the first human ground forces to reach the Valari homeworld. "What can you tell us about these Valari, Doctor?" he asked. Lisa activated the holographic projector and images of the alien species appeared in the air above the table. The Valari looked almost human, except for their blue skin, silver eyes, and the crystal formations that grew from their foreheads like natural crowns. "They're telepathic," she began. "Not mind readers exactly, but they can share emotions and basic thoughts with other Valari. They've lived in complete peace for 10,000 years. No wars, no violence, no weapons of any kind. They grow their cities from living crystal and use quantum resonance technology we're just beginning to understand." Major Kate Sullivan, commander of the 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion, leaned forward. She was a tough woman with short blonde hair and scars on her arms from fighting pirates in the asteroid belt. "What about their planet? What kind of environment are we looking at?" "That's the interesting part," Lisa replied, changing the display to show Kepler 442b. "Their world is almost perfect. Stable climate, clean air, no dangerous animals or plants. The gravity is only about 80% of Earth's. It's what we call a garden world." Colonel Washington frowned. "Sounds too easy. What's the catch?" "The catch is that the Valari have never had to fight for survival like we have. Their world is so peaceful that they never developed aggression or combat instincts. They don't even understand the concept of violence until very recently." The room fell quiet as the officers thought about what that meant. Every human in the room had grown up on Earth, a planet that had tried to kill their ancestors for millions of years. Storms, earthquakes, volcanoes, ice ages, plagues, and predators had forged humanity into a species that could survive anything. The Valari had never faced any of those challenges. Captain Tony Garcia spoke up from the back of the room. He was a pilot with the kind of reflexes you needed to fly fighters in Earth's violent weather systems. "What about these Zephyrians? What do we know about them?" Lisa changed the display again, showing images of the insectoid aliens. They were tall and thin with 4 arms, compound eyes, and natural armor plating covering their bodies. "They're from a high-gravity world with a toxic atmosphere," she explained. "Physically stronger than humans, but not as adaptable. They're a hive mind species with rigid social hierarchies. They've been expanding their empire for over a century, always using the same tactics. Overwhelming force, complete destruction of native populations, strip mining of planetary resources." "Have they ever fought humans before?" asked Major Sullivan. "No," Lisa replied. "In fact, they've probably never fought anyone from a death world before." The officers looked confused, so Lisa continued. "Most intelligent species in the galaxy evolved on garden worlds like the Valari homeworld. Stable, peaceful environments that didn't require them to become aggressive or adaptable. Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world because of its extreme weather, geological instability, aggressive ecosystem, and high gravity." She paused to let that sink in. "We're probably the most dangerous species they've ever encountered, and they don't even know we exist yet." On the other side of Earth, at the Luna shipyards, Captain Michelle Ross supervised the loading of her assault carrier, Liberty's Edge. The massive ship could carry 200 fighters and 5,000 Marines. Her crew worked around the clock to prepare for departure, loading ammunition, medical supplies, and everything else they would need for combat in an alien star system. "Captain, called her executive officer, Commander Rick Hayes. He was reading a data pad with intelligence reports about the Zephyrian Empire. I've been studying their military tactics. They rely heavily on numerical superiority and intimidation. They've never faced an enemy that fights back effectively. Michelle nodded as she watched loading crews move fighter aircraft into the ship's hangar bays. What's their standard invasion procedure? Orbital bombardment first to destroy any defenses, then mass landing of ground troops to eliminate the population. They usually finish a conquest in less than 24 hours. Not this time, Michelle said grimly. She had grown up in the slums of New York, where you learned to fight or you didn't survive. The idea of bullies wiping out peaceful families made her blood boil. Throughout the solar system, similar scenes played out on dozens of ships. The battleship Constitution loaded its massive railguns with tungsten rounds designed to punch through any armor. The hospital ship Mercy prepared operating rooms for alien physiology. Transport vessels filled with Marines who had trained in Earth's harshest environments. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos briefed her troops aboard the assault transport Ranger. She was a veteran of the Mars conflicts, where human colonists had fought corporate armies in low-gravity environments. Her soldiers were the best Earth had to offer, trained to fight in any environment against any enemy. Listen up, she told her assembled Marines. We're going into combat against an alien species that has conquered dozens of worlds. They've never lost a battle and they've never shown mercy to anyone, but they've also never fought humans before. She walked among her troops, looking each one in the eye. You were born on a world that spent 4 billion years trying to kill everything that lived on it. Your ancestors survived ice ages, plagues, predators, and wars that would have wiped out any other species. That's what makes you dangerous. That's what's going to save those alien civilians. A young private raised his hand. Ma'am, what if we're too late? Maria smiled grimly. Then we make sure the Zephyrians regret ever hearing of the Valari. And we make sure the galaxy knows that humans keep their promises, even to people we've never met. As the last ships launched from Earth's orbital stations, President Martinez stood on the observation deck of the space station Freedom and watched humanity's fleet disappear into hyperspace. Admiral Peterson stood beside her, both of them knowing they had just committed their entire military to saving a species they knew almost nothing about. Carl, she said quietly, what are the odds we can actually pull this off? The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442b system like a storm made of steel and fire. Admiral Carl Peterson stood on the bridge of the battleship Constitution and watched his tactical display light up with enemy contacts. There were over 300 Zephyrian ships surrounding the Valari homeworld, their dark hulls blocking out the light of the twin suns. My God, whispered Captain Jake Morrison from the bridge of the New Frontier. He had arrived 12 hours earlier and been forced to watch helplessly as Zephyrian landing ships descended toward the crystal cities below. They're everywhere. Admiral Peterson's voice came over the fleet communication channel, calm and steady despite the impossible odds they faced. All ships, this is Admiral Peterson. We are outnumbered 10 to 1 by an enemy that has never lost a battle. They have been killing innocent people for the past 6 hours while we traveled here. I want every one of those alien ships destroyed or driven off. No mercy, no quarter. Show them what happens when they threaten people under human protection. The response was immediate and savage. 200 human warships opened fire at the same time, their weapons lighting up space with lines of pure energy and streams of metal moving at incredible speed. The Zephyrians had been focused on the planet below and were caught completely off guard. A dozen of their ships exploded in the first 30 seconds of combat. On the planet's surface, Ambassador Nalthara pressed herself against the crystal wall of an underground shelter as Zephyrian soldiers marched through her city. The beautiful crystal towers that had grown over thousands of years lay in ruins. Smoke rose from burning buildings where her people had tried to hide. The Zephyrian warriors were 8 feet tall with black armor and weapons that fired bolts of red energy. They killed everything they saw without hesitation or mercy. Then the sky above them exploded with light. Nalthara felt a surge of hope through the telepathic connection she shared with other survivors. Something was fighting the Zephyrians in space. Someone had actually answered their call for help. High above the planet, Captain Tony Garcia led his fighter squadron in a deadly dance among the Zephyrian ships. His fighter was built for combat in Earth's violent atmosphere, designed to handle winds that could tear apart buildings and storms that lasted for days. The alien interceptors were fast, but they flew in rigid formations that made them easy targets for pilots trained in Earth's chaotic skies. Fox 2. Fox 2. Garcia called over the radio as he fired missiles at a group of enemy fighters.
Splash 3 bandits.
These bugs can't adapt worth a damn. His wingman, Lieutenant Sarah Lopez, rolled her fighter between two Zephyrian ships and fired her guns at point-blank range. Both alien craft exploded in balls of fire and debris. They fight like computers, she said. No creativity, no improvisation. Just like shooting targets at the Academy. The space battle raged for 20 minutes before the first Zephyrian ships began to retreat. They had never faced an enemy that could match their firepower and outfight their tactics at the same time. Admiral Peterson watched his tactical display with grim satisfaction as enemy contacts began disappearing from the screen. But the real fight was just beginning. All dropships. Commence Operation Thunder, Peterson ordered. Get our Marines on the ground now. Colonel Sam Washington felt his stomach drop as his transport ship dove through the atmosphere toward the largest Valari city. Around him, 200 Marines checked their weapons and armor one final time. They were about to make an orbital assault against an enemy that controlled the entire planet's surface. 60 seconds to drop, announced the pilot.
LZ is hot.
Enemy forces concentrated around the city center. Washington stood up and grabbed the overhead rail as the ship shook from enemy fire. He looked at his Marines and saw the same expression on every face. They were scared, but they were ready to fight. That's what made them human. Listen up, he shouted over the noise of the engines. Those alien bugs have been killing civilians for 6 hours. When we hit the ground, I want every one of them dead or running. Remember your training. Remember why we're here. Remember that these people called for help and we answered. The transport ship's rear door opened and Washington could see the Crystal City below. Smoke rose from burning buildings and he could see Zephyrian soldiers moving through the streets like ants. His anger burned hot and bright in his chest. Go, go, go! The Marines jumped from the transport ship and fell toward the city like meteors. Their powered armor could survive the impact and their weapons were loaded with ammunition, designed to punch through any armor. Washington hit the ground in the middle of a Zephyrian patrol and opened fire before his boots touched the crystal street. The aliens had never seen anything like it. Human soldiers falling from the sky with weapons that could cut through their armor like paper. Marines who could carry equipment that weighed as much as the aliens themselves. Warriors who fought with a savage fury that came from 4 billion years of evolution on a world that never showed mercy. Sergeant Danny Cooper landed on the roof of a crystal tower where Zephyrian snipers were shooting at fleeing civilians. He kicked in the door and found 6 of the insect aliens inside, their compound eyes reflecting his helmet lights. They raised their weapons, but Cooper was faster. His assault rifle fired explosive rounds that could blow holes in starship armor. The aliens didn't stand a chance. Rooftop secure, he reported over the radio, moving to assist civilian evacuation. 3 blocks away, Major Kate Sullivan led her reconnaissance team through the city's underground tunnels. They had found a group of Valari children hiding in a crystal cave beneath their school. The children were terrified, their silver eyes wide with fear as the human soldiers approached. It's okay, Sullivan said, kneeling down to their level. Her helmet's translation software converted her words into the musical language of the Valari. We're here to help. We're humans and we came because your people asked for help. One of the children, a little girl with pale blue skin and crystals growing from her forehead like a crown, reached out to touch Sullivan's armored hand. Through the telepathic connection all Valari shared, she could feel something she had never experienced before. These strange aliens were not like the Zephyrians. They were dangerous, yes, but their danger was focused outward, toward those who threatened the innocent. You came, the child whispered. You really came. Above them, the battle continued to rage. Human fighters swept the sky clear of enemy aircraft while Marine drop pods continued to fall like rain throughout the city. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting an enemy unlike anything they had ever encountered. Corporal Lisa White, a combat medic with the 1st Marine Division, treated wounded Valari civilians in a makeshift aid station. The aliens were amazed by her strength. She could lift grown Valari adults like they were children and carry them to safety under fire that would have killed anyone else. How are you so strong? Asked a wounded Valari artist whose crystal paintings lay shattered around his ruined studio. We come from a hard world, Lisa replied as she bandaged his injuries. A world that made us tough so we could protect people like you. The tide of battle began to turn as more human forces reached the surface. The Zephyrians had expected to face a helpless population with no military experience. Instead, they found themselves fighting soldiers who had evolved on a planet where everything tried to kill them. Captain Jake Morrison led a strike team toward the Zephyrian command post in the city center. His team moved through the crystal streets like ghosts, using tactics developed in Earth's urban warfare schools. The aliens were good fighters, but they thought in straight lines and rigid hierarchies. Humans thought in 3 dimensions and adapted to changing situations faster than any species in the galaxy. Target building is 2 blocks ahead, reported Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, who had volunteered for the ground mission. Enemy strength approximately 50 soldiers plus command staff. Morrison nodded and checked his weapon. The Zephyrian commanders would never expect a direct assault on their headquarters. They had probably never lost a command post in their entire military history. That's about to change, he said grimly. As the human assault intensified, Zephyrian forces throughout the city began to fall back toward their landing zones. They had lost control of the air and their ground troops were being systematically destroyed by an enemy that fought with impossible courage and skill. High General Krextar, the Zephyrian invasion commander, stood in his command ship and watched his tactical display with growing alarm. Half of his invasion force had been destroyed or driven off in less than 3 hours. His ships were retreating from orbit and his ground troops were calling for immediate evacuation. It was impossible. The Zephyrian Empire had never lost a battle. They had conquered 47 worlds and eliminated dozens of species. They were the most feared military force in the galaxy, but these humans fought like nothing he had ever seen. They took casualties that would break any other species and kept fighting. They used tactics that his computers couldn't predict. They seemed to get stronger and more dangerous the longer the battle continued. For the first time in his long military career, High General Krextar was afraid. The battle had been raging for 8 hours when the Zephyrian reinforcements arrived. High General Krextar watched from his command ship as massive destroyer-class vessels dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Each ship was 3 miles long and carried enough firepower to destroy a moon. There were 20 of them, along with 200 support vessels and 50,000 fresh troops. Finally, Krextar clicked in satisfaction. Now these humans will learn what happens when they interfere with the Zephyrian Empire. On the bridge of the Constitution, Admiral Carl Peterson studied his tactical display with growing concern. His fleet had been fighting hard and they had taken losses. 3 destroyers damaged, 2 cruisers destroyed, and dozens of smaller ships crippled. His Marines on the ground were holding their positions, but they were running low on ammunition and medical supplies. Now the enemy had reinforcements that outnumbered his entire fleet. "Admiral," called his communications officer, "Captain Morrison is requesting permission to attempt a boarding action on the enemy flagship." Peterson turned to look at the man. Captain Jake Morrison had been fighting in space and on the ground for the past 8 hours. His ship was damaged and his crew was exhausted. But Peterson could see the determination in the younger officer's eyes through the video link. "Jake, that's suicide," Peterson said bluntly. "Their flagship has over 10,000 crew members and enough weapons to level a city." "Maybe," Morrison replied. "But they're holding captured Valari leaders in their brig, including members of their ruling council. If we can get them back, we can coordinate a better defense of the remaining cities." Peterson looked at his tactical display again. The new Zephyrian fleet was moving into attack position. In 30 minutes, they would have overwhelming firepower advantage. He needed something desperate, something the enemy would never expect, something only a human would be crazy enough to attempt. "Permission granted," he said, "but I want a full SEAL team with you. If you're going to board that ship, you're going to do it right." On the planet's surface, Colonel Sam Washington crouched behind the ruins of a crystal building and watched Zephyrian reinforcements land in the city center. His Marines had cleared most of the original invasion force, but these new troops were different. They were larger, with heavier armor and more advanced weapons, elite soldiers of the Zephyrian military. "Colonel," called Sergeant Danny Cooper over the radio, "we've got enemy heavy armor moving in from the east. Looks like some kind of walking tank." Washington looked through his binoculars and saw the machine Cooper was talking about. It was 30 feet tall with 6 legs and enough guns to outfit a small warship. The Zephyrians had brought their heavy weapons to finish what their regular troops couldn't. "All units fall back to defensive positions around the evacuation zone," Washington ordered. We need to buy time for the civilians to get to the shelters. 3 blocks away, Private Jenny Davis heard the order and looked around at the group of Valari children she was protecting. They were hiding in the basement of a crystal school, while their parents were evacuated to safer areas. Jenny was 19 years old, fresh out of basic training and scared out of her mind. But she was also a human being, and these children were depending on her. "Stay here," she told them in broken Valari. "I'll be right back." She climbed the stairs to street level and saw the Zephyrian assault team approaching. 20 soldiers in heavy armor, moving methodically toward the school. They would find the children in minutes. Jenny checked her weapon. She had 2 magazines left and 1 grenade. Against 20 heavily armed aliens, it wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. She stepped out into the street and opened fire. The first Zephyrian soldier went down immediately, her explosive rounds punching through his armor like paper. The others turned toward her, their weapons tracking her position. Jenny dove behind a crystal formation as energy bolts sizzled past her head. "Come on, you ugly bugs," she shouted, trying to draw them away from the school. "Is that all you've got?" The aliens advanced toward her position exactly like she had hoped. Every step they took away from the school was another few seconds for the children to stay hidden. Jenny popped up and fired again, dropping another soldier before diving back into cover. Her radio crackled with voices as other Marines called for backup, reported enemy positions, and coordinated their defense. But Jenny was alone with 20 enemies and a handful of ammunition. The kind of impossible situation that humans had been facing for millions of years. She pulled the pin on her grenade and threw it into the middle of the Zephyrian formation. The explosion knocked down 3 more soldiers and scattered the rest. Jenny used the confusion to sprint to a new position, firing as she ran. 15 enemies left, 1 magazine of ammunition, and a group of alien children who were counting on her to keep them safe. Jenny smiled grimly and kept fighting. In space, Captain Jake Morrison's boarding team approached the Zephyrian flagship in a stealth shuttle. Chief Petty Officer Mike Turner led a team of 6 Navy SEALs, each one trained for combat in zero-gravity and hostile environments. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez sat at the shuttle's controls, flying through debris and weapons fire with the skill that came from growing up on a world where flying was dangerous. Approaching the target ship's docking bay, Amy reported. "Sensors show minimal security. They're not expecting visitors." Morrison nodded and checked his weapon. The plan was simple in concept but deadly in execution. Get inside the enemy ship, fight through 10,000 alien soldiers, rescue the prisoners, and somehow get back out alive. The kind of mission that military academies used as examples of what not to try. But they were going to do it anyway. The shuttle docked with the Zephyrian flagship, and Mike Turner's team went to work on the airlock. These SEALs had trained in Earth's oceans where the pressure could crush a man and the darkness was absolute. Fighting in an alien spaceship would be easy by comparison. "Charges set," Turner reported. "Everyone ready?" The explosive charge blew the airlock open, and the human boarding team poured into the enemy ship. The first Zephyrian guards were caught completely off guard. They had never faced an enemy boarding action before, and they certainly hadn't expected humans to be bold enough to attack their flagship. Morrison and his team fought their way through the ship's corridors, using tactics developed in urban warfare on Earth. The Zephyrians were good soldiers, but they fought in predictable patterns. Humans adapted to each new situation faster than their enemies could react. "Prisoner area should be 3 decks down," Morrison called out as they reached an elevator shaft. "Mike, can your boys get us there?" Turner grinned behind his helmet. "Sir, we've been in worse places than this." Back on the planet, Dr. Lisa Turner worked frantically in a field hospital set up in the crystal caves beneath the city. She was treating both human Marines and Valari civilians, learning alien anatomy under fire, but she had made an incredible discovery while working with injured Valari telepaths. "Colonel Washington," she called over the radio, "I need you to hear this. The Valari can share more than just emotions through their telepathic connection. They can share memories, tactical information, even combat experience." Washington ducked behind cover as a Zephyrian energy bolt nearly took his head off. "What are you saying, Doc?" "I'm saying that if we can link human combat knowledge to their telepathic network, we can turn every surviving Valari into a tactical coordinator. They can see the entire battlefield at once and coordinate perfect defensive positions." It was an impossible idea that might just work. Lisa had been experimenting with neural interface technology for years, trying to understand how human brains processed information differently from other species. If she could create a temporary link between human tactical thinking and Valari telepathy, they might be able to turn the tide of the ground battle. "Do it," Washington ordered. "We need every advantage we can get." In the crystal caves, Lisa worked with a group of Valari healers to create something that had never been attempted before, a battle meld between human warriors and telepathic aliens. She placed neural sensors on the foreheads of volunteer Marines and connected them to Valari telepaths through quantum resonance fields. The effect was immediate and startling. The Valari suddenly had access to thousands of years of human military knowledge. They could see the battlefield through human eyes and understand tactics that their peaceful species had never needed to develop. Within minutes, the surviving Valari throughout the city were coordinating with human forces to create perfect defensive positions. They could see enemy movements before they happened and guide Marines to exactly where they were needed most. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to know their every move before they made it. Human forces appeared in exactly the right places at exactly the right times. Their carefully planned assault began to fall apart as the humans and Valari worked together with impossible coordination. High General Krextar watched his tactical displays with growing horror. His reinforcements were being systematically destroyed by an enemy that should have been defeated hours ago. His ground forces were reporting impossible coordination between human soldiers and Valari civilians. The last Zephyrian mothership hung in space like a wounded giant, its engines destroyed by Captain Jake Morrison's sabotage team. Smoke poured from its hull and escape pods scattered in all directions as the massive vessel began to lose power. Admiral Carl Peterson watched from the bridge of the Constitution as his fleet surrounded the enemy flagship. "Admiral," called his communications officer. "The Zephyrian High Commander is requesting a parley." Peterson almost smiled. In 300 years of galactic conquest, the Zephyrian Empire had never asked for peace talks. They had never needed to. Today was different. "Tell him we'll meet on the planet's surface," Peterson replied, "in the crystal garden that his forces tried to destroy." On Kepler 442b, the sounds of battle had finally stopped. Human Marines and Valari civilians worked together to clear rubble from the crystal cities and tend to the wounded. The beautiful towers that had taken thousands of years to grow were damaged but not destroyed. The Valari would rebuild, and this time they would not be defenseless. Private Jenny Davis sat on the steps of the Crystal School where she had made her desperate stand against 20 Zephyrian soldiers. Her armor was scorched and her ammunition was gone, but she was alive. More importantly, the 12 Valari children she had protected were safe. They sat around her now, their large silver eyes full of curiosity as they tried to understand how one small human had defeated so many enemies. "How did you know you could win?" asked one of the children in careful English. Jenny looked down at the young alien and tried to find words to explain something she wasn't sure she understood herself. "I didn't know I could win," she said finally, "but I knew I had to try. That's what humans do." Colonel Sam Washington approached the school with a medical team. His uniform was dirty and torn from 12 hours of continuous combat, but his eyes were bright with victory. He had just received word that the last Zephyrian ground forces were surrendering throughout the planet. "How are you holding up, Davis?" he asked. "Fine, sir," Jenny replied, standing up and saluting. "Just thinking about what happens next." Washington nodded and looked around at the damaged city. Human soldiers were helping Valari civilians everywhere he looked. Combat engineers were already working to repair the crystal towers, using a combination of human technology and Valari growing techniques. Medical teams were treating wounded from both species with equal care. "What happens next is we keep our promise," he said. "We make sure this never happens again." In the Crystal Garden at the heart of the main city, Admiral Peterson waited for the Zephyrian delegation. The garden had been one of the most beautiful places on the planet before the attack, with crystal trees that sang in harmony and flowers that glowed with their own inner light. Many of the crystal trees were broken now, but the Valari were already working to heal them. Dr. Lisa Turner stood beside the Admiral, her neural interface equipment still humming with data from the telepathic battle link she had created. The connection between human tactical knowledge and Valari telepathy had changed everything. For the first time in history, two completely different species had truly fought as one. "The Valari want to make the neural link permanent," she told Peterson quietly. "Not for war, but for understanding." They think humans and Valari working together could solve problems that neither species could handle alone. Peterson nodded. He had seen the tactical reports. When humans and Valari combined their abilities, they became something greater than the sum of their parts. Human adaptability and Valari coordination created possibilities that hadn't existed before. A shuttle landed in the garden, and the Zephyrian delegation emerged. High General Krextar walked slowly, his compound eyes taking in the destruction his forces had caused and the humans who had stopped them. Behind him came a dozen other Zephyrian officers, all of them looking like they couldn't quite believe what had happened. Admiral Peterson stepped forward to meet them. Colonel Washington flanked him on one side along with Captain Morrison, who had returned from his successful rescue mission. Dr. Turner stayed close by with her recording equipment, documenting everything for history. High General Krextar, Peterson said formally. I am Admiral Carl Peterson of the Earth Defense Force. The Zephyrian leader studied the human commander with his black compound eyes. Peterson was not particularly tall or physically impressive compared to the 8-foot alien warrior, but there was something in his posture that commanded respect. The kind of confidence that came from winning battles that should have been impossible to win. You are the leader of these humans, Krextar said in accented English. His voice was like clicking metal. I do not understand your species. Why did you come here? This world means nothing to you. These people are not your allies. What did you gain from fighting us? Peterson was quiet for a moment, looking around at the crystal garden where Valari children played among human soldiers. We gained the knowledge that when innocent people call for help, humans answer. That's worth more than all the territory in the galaxy. Krextar's head tilted in confusion. You risked your entire fleet for strangers. You lost ships and soldiers for people you had never met. This makes no strategic sense. No, Peterson agreed. It makes human sense. Ambassador Nalthara approached the group, her crystal crown repaired and shining in the light of the twin suns. She had been working with the rescued council members to coordinate relief efforts throughout the planet. Her people were safe, but she knew the real negotiations were just beginning. High General, she said to Krextar, your empire has conquered 47 worlds and eliminated dozens of species. Today you learned that some fights cannot be won through force alone. Krextar looked at the Valari ambassador, then back at the human admiral.
What do you want from us?
Simple, Peterson replied. Complete withdrawal from Valari space, reparations for the damage your forces caused, and a guarantee that the Zephyrian Empire will never again attack a peaceful world without provocation. And if we refuse? Peterson smiled grimly. Then you'll discover that humans keep their promises. We promise to protect the Valari, and we will. Every time you attack them, we'll be here to stop you. Every time you threaten innocent people anywhere in the galaxy, we'll show up to ruin your day. The negotiations continued for 6 hours. President Elena Martinez arrived aboard the flagship Constitution to formalize the peace treaty. The Zephyrian Empire agreed to not only cease hostilities against the Valari, but to provide technological aid to rebuild their world. They would also share intelligence about other aggressive species that threatened peaceful civilizations. But the most important part of the agreement was barely noticed by the galactic media. The Zephyrians would spread word throughout their territory about a new species called humans, a species that answered distress calls from strangers and fought impossible battles to protect the innocent. As the human fleet prepared to return to Earth, leaving behind a permanent defense station and a promise of protection, Ambassador Nalthara addressed the assembled forces in the Crystal Garden. When our world was dying, she said, her telepathic voice carrying emotions that needed no translation, we begged the stars for mercy. We sent our cry for help into the darkness, hoping someone, somewhere, would care that we were about to disappear forever. She paused, looking at the human soldiers and officers gathered around her. The stars heard us, but they sent us something better than mercy. They sent us warriors who fight not for conquest, but for the simple principle that no innocent should suffer while good people draw breath. They sent us humans. Captain Jake Morrison stood with his crew and listened to the alien ambassador speak about his species. He thought about the long journey from Earth, about the battle they had just fought, about the children they had saved and the lives they had protected. Today the galaxy learned something new. Nalthara continued. There is a blue world in the outer rim where live the children of a death world. They are dangerous beyond measure, but their danger is pointed outward. toward those who threaten the helpless. When the innocent cry for help, the humans come running. As the ceremony ended and the human ships began their journey home, word was already spreading across the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire, which had never lost a battle, had been defeated by a species most civilizations had never heard of. These humans came from a world so hostile that it had forged them into perfect warriors, but they used their strength only to protect others. On distant worlds, other peaceful species heard the story and began to hope. If the Valari could be saved from certain destruction, maybe they could be too. If there really were warriors somewhere in the galaxy who fought for justice instead of profit, maybe the universe wasn't as dark as it seemed. Captain Morrison stood on the observation deck of the New Frontier and watched Kepler 442b shrink behind them. The twin suns were shining brightly again, no longer blocked by enemy ships. The crystal cities were already beginning to heal, growing new towers to replace the ones that had been destroyed. "Captain," said Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, joining him at the window, "do you think we'll be back?" Morrison smiled and looked out at the stars. Somewhere in that vast darkness, other people were probably calling for help right now. Other worlds were facing dangers they couldn't handle alone.